Hello and welcome to Flowers and Folklore. If you love flowers and folklore and odd floral facts, then you're in the right place. If you've listened before, then you'll recognize my voice, but I am joined by a brand new host, Keeley Rees. Do you want to say hello, Keeley?
I'd love to say hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Keeley Reese, and recording this now from Canberra, Australia, in my little cabin in my backyard. And it's amazing to be here.
I'm so pleased you're here. I am Sarah and I'm a florist living in Glasgow in the UK. I run a floristry business called Rook Botanics, which I started about 5 years ago. This episode is just going to be a get to know the hosts. If you've never listened before, then you'll get to meet me for the first time as well as Keeley. And I am very happy to be just joined with a co-host. I think it's going to be a really new experience and just more wholesome because Keeley is wonderful. So, Keeley, give the listeners a little bit about you, who you are, what's your background, and why you're just so incredible.
Um, well, I can think I can do some of that. So I'm a Star Trek nerd, probably first and foremost. I have a greyhound and a whippet, and I'm currently renovating my house, which means that I'm basically running around Facebook Marketplace finds on the weekends, like it's a part-time job. My background is in marketing and in short film and TV commercials and things like that. I was part of that whole film video world and was pursuing life as an actor for probably a lot longer than I should have. And probably the biggest driver for me in whatever area I go into is storytelling and telling stories that matter and telling stories of beauty and light. And so that's kind of my big driver. And I also have a son who is nearly 19, which is crazy.
I don't think I knew your son was that old. I thought he was like really young. I don't know why
That's
I thought
that's
that.
so funny. That's the second time I've had that conversation this week. The girls at dance the other night were like, "What? What? I thought you had a little boy." I'm like, "No." He's like, "Well, I did have a little boy, but he's just like a fully grown adult now."
That's blown my mind. I mean, it's because you look so young.
I think it just went by so fast. I think I'm pretty immature, like in my love of like the kind of crazy and the little and the whimsical and the joyful and things like that. So I think I probably come across a bit more youthful than I am.
Yeah, but I honestly think that's so lovely. I think that's one of the things that I just adore most about you. And I don't think it's immature. I think it is just honoring like the loves that you had when you were young and just embracing your inner child. And like inner child kind of is a word that makes me cringe a little bit, but I think there's something to it. Yeah, I'm rediscovering that the things I loved when I was 13 are actually the things that I adore now, being in my mid 30s. And I think that's
Mm.
quite nice.
I remember you saying that once actually, that you felt like teenage Sarah kind of actually really knew where it was at. And now it's just sort of like you kind of went away from it for a bit, but actually she was kind of on the money, you know,
Yeah.
all along. And you just had to re-find it again for some reason. We lose it. It's so easy to lose those instincts and
Yeah.
that, that sort of childlike wonder. But what about you, Sarah? Can you share with us a bit about your background?
So my background is actually also, well, it's in floristry, but it's also in marketing. I started working in a flower shop when I was 14 and I stayed working there just during holidays and weekends and things like that until I was about 21. I took a gap year before I came up to Glasgow to do my BTEC in floristry. A BTEC is just like a qualification that you get from college. But when I attended my BTEC, I had already been doing floristry for about 4 years or so. So I'd been taught just so much by the florist that I work with. So I was in a really lucky position. And then I came up to Glasgow for university. I studied religious studies and English literature, which ended up just being religious studies. I dropped the literature. I loved the theology department. It was just like a cozy little basement in the gorgeous, like historic Glasgow Uni building. And so, yeah, I just enjoyed religious studies where we just sat around and chatted about feminism, really. It was very good fun. But I carried on going back to Derby to work in the flower shop during Valentine's and Christmas and peak holidays and things like that. and I'd just work so many crazy hours that that would then mean I didn't have to get a job up in Glasgow. I would just get the train down to Derby, do a mega shift, and then come back. And it was quite a nice balance, but I just didn't think floristry could ever pay the bills. So I fell into marketing and I thought I really enjoyed it. And then during lockdown, I was like, oh, this just isn't for me. Like, I'm really hating this. And then I did the funeral flowers for my grandma, and it just reignited everything. And it made me realize actually, I can be a florist. I don't have to work for a grumpy old man. I can just have my own business and then keep the profits myself. And so, yeah, that is the beginning of Rook Botanics. It's definitely just reignited so much passion that I used to have that I think I lost when I was in marketing. Like I kind of lost myself and I lost my voice. And I know Keeley, this is something that we've bonded over how because you're constantly writing in someone else's voice for someone else's business, you then lose like what is your magic, what is your voice. And so
Yeah.
yeah, it's just it can be quite sad. So I am very happy to be away from marketing, although now I have to do full-time marketing job for my own business,
Yes,
which is so hard as well. Like I don't want to do
yeah.
that. I just want to play with flowers. I'm a Lord of the Rings nerd, absolutely obsessed. Every year when I start mossing my wreaths for wreath season, I do a rewatch of the extended editions of Lord of the Rings. I used to have a gorgeous greyhound as well, which was another thing we bonded over. And currently we are fostering a greyhound, and I am just a big nerd, to be honest. Love playing my Switch. I love reading, and yeah, just anything that's a bit nerdy makes me very happy.
There's so much that we connected over, so many similarities. I love Lord of the Rings. I love the Nintendo. We
Yeah,
both play Zelda. Like
yeah,
both were in marketing. We both moved away from flowers, came back to flowers. Like there's just, and our grandparents played such a pivotal, impactful role as well in helping kind of find purpose, I think.
yeah,
It's just kind of bizarre. And then the greyhounds as well that we both,
yeah,
you know, it's like
yeah.
how many things can one person, two people on the opposite sides of the world have in common? It was just
Mhm.
crazy.
Yeah, it's so bizarre, and I think we should share how we met because um, to be honest, almost by chance, really, because we never would have met if it wasn't for the internet, which I just love.
Yeah.
So for people who don't know, Keeley ran a online course called the Substack Soiree, which I joined, and then I was just kind of a bit like obsessed with Keeley. She was just like so magical and wonderful. And then it kind of just all started from there.
You really stood out to me it may have partly been like your gorgeous profile picture where Sarah has this most amazing headdress flower crown on her profile picture, and I just could not stop staring at this gorgeous flower crown. Um, and then, yeah, we connected more and more through the course. And then I think you messaged me on Instagram of a wedding you had just done or you had seen, and it had like disco balls everywhere. And you're like, oh, this made me think of
Yeah.
you. And I'm like, okay, I love that. You're you're seeing disco balls and you think of me. Like I'm okay with that association. Um, and then I really, really wanted to ask you to be on my podcast, Creative Courage. And so, yes, I had you on that. We recorded an episode together, and I think we chatted for like 3 hours, and it
Yeah.
was amazing. It was we just felt like we'd just known each other forever. Like,
Yeah. It was so good. I couldn't believe how well it had gone, but I had been really nervous. Just because like being a guest on someone else's podcast, you've just got lots of things to think about. So I was getting a bit nervous. And I'd said to Scott, please don't make noise around the flat. Uh, didn't realize how much he'd taken it to heart. And
oh
so
no.
we ended up being on the call for 3 hours. And I think for the last hour, it wasn't even stuff we included in the podcast. We were just chatting. And then I came out and Scott was like desperate for a wee, desperate for
Oh
some food.
no. Poor
Like
Scott. I'm sorry, Scott.
Abby also needed a walk. And it was just one of those things where Scott was just like, oh, did you have fun? Right. Yeah, well, lovely.
No.
It was super close to when we found out that Abby had a tumor, and it it was just such a like obviously a bizarre time. And I just remember, I think because you also had greyhounds, you knew what it's like. You were just so supportive, and then it felt like, I don't know, it honestly makes me really happy that that episode's there because we talk about Abby, and I'm fairly sure that I was like moaning about how daft she is. And I feel like that's quite nice that there's that final record of almost like
Mm.
her last week of being, well, I suppose she wasn't healthy, but in our eyes, she seemed healthy. And so, yeah, I think that just really bonded us together as well. And just,
Mm.
I don't know, I'm just so pleased that that episode exists. Honestly, it just felt like it was meant to be. And I knew that we needed to work on a project together. And so for the whole of summer, I've been meaning to do a Flowers and Folklore episode. And it just, I think I was still feeling grief because of Abby's passing, but it was just busy and doing a solo project. No one keeps you accountable. And so I was just like, oh, it just makes sense. Like, Keeley, come and join Flowers and Folklore.
But I think the energy, like when you do something like collaborative, the shared energy kind of carries you both. Whereas when you are on your own, you shoulder so much doubt and extra emotional things that
Yeah.
it is a lot harder to do something on your own. But I'm also really glad that you said that about the episode because I have wondered a couple of times, like, I've thought, oh, I better just check in that she's okay, that that's still there or that the image is still there because it was such a
Yeah.
beautiful moment where we're both talking about our both,
It
and they're both
was.
brindles, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah, I know.
just such a shock. But yeah.
Yeah, it was. It was an absolute whirlwind. And so, yes, I've had a few people message to be like, oh, when's the next episode of Flowers and Folklore? And I kept being like, there'll be one coming, there'll be one coming. And I think I just needed the summer off to kind of
Mm.
process and escape reality for a little bit. But yeah, we are back. And the plan is we're going to do carry on doing a monthly episode where we do a deep dive into a flower. But then we're also going to have a few extra little mini episodes. Keely, would you like to tell me how you fell in love with flowers?
I feel like it's not dishonest to say I spent my childhood in the garden. The house I grew up in was, a bit of a rubbish environment. And so I tried to not be in the house as much as possible. So I literally just spent every afternoon after school and weekends and everything just in the garden. And I just made up my own stories. And I was born in the 80s. So very much an analog childhood. So it wasn't like there was phones or devices or anything like that. We did have a Sega Mega Drive, which was awesome. So I would definitely play Alex Kidd and things like that on the old school Sega. But for the most part, I spent my time in the garden and I would make flower crowns. We had this purple flower on a vine, and I found that if I pulled the vine, I could get quite a long bit, and I would just wind it over and over and over again in on itself. And then I
Mhm.
worked out that I could thread little flowers into the little woven bits. And so I made these little flower crowns and I'd just walk around the garden and I'd pretend to be like, I'd have these make believe like imaginary buckets and I'd feed my imaginary farm animals. And then the next day I'd be like a princess and I just had my own kind of world. And then on the weekends, my dad, he would have his cup of coffee and I can still see like the steam rising from the mug as he walked around outside with his big winter woolly jumper. And yeah, even on the coldest days in winter when the ground had like icy sparkles on it, he'd walk around the garden and he'd be like checking on his plants and things like that. And he'd tell me about things and he'd tell me what the name was and he'd tell me which ones I could eat. And then on the school holidays, my granddad did something similar. So I would stay in Sydney with my granddad as often as I could on the school holidays. And he would walk me around the garden and he would teach me about what the plants were and what they did and what you could do with them and how to care for them. And then he just put me to work in the garden, weeding and watering and caring for them. And so for me, it felt like home. And I would just make bunches of flowers and put them together and take them to people or put them inside the house. And so people would just say to me, oh, you should be a florist one day. You should be a florist. And I was like, yeah, but I'm going to be an actor. So no. And so I did. I pursued acting for a really long time. And around the time I was beginning to pursue acting, I started to do a certificate in floristry. And I loved it. But then I told myself that if I pursued floristry as a backup, as my plan B, so to speak, if acting failed and I had the backup of floristry, I thought if I did that, I'd never go all in on the acting dream. So I told myself I was, instead of providing myself some scaffolding or like a steady backup, I was kind of sabotaging my dream pursuit by giving myself something else to fall in love with that my full energy would be taken. So I didn't keep pursuing the floristry. And when I did give up acting, probably over a decade later, I did think about floristry. And then the other story I told myself was that, oh, I could never do that because you have to be cold. The rooms have to be cold. And I hate being cold. So I was like, that's not happening. But I think I just told myself that because it seemed like you said, like it didn't seem like a job that you could
Mm.
really truly pursue and have as a real job. And I'd already pursued the crazy job with the acting. So I kind of was convinced to go and pursue a communications degree, writing a Bachelor of Writing and Media Communications. And that led me into, as I said before, sort of the film world and that kind of thing. And I was there for a long time, ghostwriting and doing email marketing and TV ads and all kinds of things like that. I did that for a long time. And then probably maybe 3 years ago, I started to feel really miserable. And it took me a really long time to tune into it, to work out what was making me feel really miserable. And it wasn't until maybe, and like I'm talking like I would be sobbing. I remember sobbing last Christmas Day. I was just sobbing. I was like, this is rubbish. Like I've now boxed myself into a position where my skills and my specialties are all in this kind of like online marketing space, which
Mm.
has burned me out more than I can say. I literally have no words for anyone else anymore, like as in like to write their copy for them to do. I have nothing
Mhm.
left. And but I have no other, like that's my space. Like how do you, and I'm, in my 40s, you can't just, but how do you just suddenly, I don't want to go and just get a job in a retail shop. Like that's fine, but that's not, I could do more. And then something, I was driving in the car and something, this voice just went, well, what if you just went and got your floristry certificate? And I went, I'm going to do it. I looked it up that day and I was enrolled within like a week and I just started my first lesson, yeah, 2 weeks ago.
That is just incredible. Listening to you talk, I just got goosebumps. And it's so funny how similar our stories are, just like at different parts in our lives. But it honestly feels like one of those things that's just meant to be for you. Like it was just meant to happen this way.
I have to say, I feel emotional almost every day at the moment, but in a good way instead of being like sobbing. Um, because it just feels like something in me has woken up and like now my world is filling with flowers and there's something, it's not, it's bizarre because I'm like, that's been there this whole time. How did I not
Mhm.
tune into it? How did I not hear it? Like I heard it, I knew it was there, I knew the pull was there, other people saw it in me, but I just kept shutting it down and I kept doing other things. And I find that really bizarre. It's in our spirit. We know it's part of our being, but to actually step out and do it, it has to kind of come from, I don't know, like the realm of the subconscious into like actually like right here where you can see it as a thought that you need to consider and not just throw away. And I find that I feel like I've just become a different person in the last few weeks. The sense of purpose that I have now, the joy that I have now, and in pursuing this life with flowers and like what I can do with it, it's I'm like, oh man, I'm just so grateful.
I love that so much. And I think it's happened at precisely the right time. I think you have so much experience that you're bringing to it that's like outside of the floral world that I think will just give you that edge. I certainly know lots of people who have been a florist from day one and they're incredible florists, but then find it hard to market their own business or they find it hard to tell like their brand story and all those things like that. And so I think you're gonna have just such a wealth of experience in so many different areas that you're gonna take over Australia with your flowers.
And I know we have really different stories, but we also have quite a similar story as
Mm.
well. So, would you mind sharing with us how you came to flowers?
Yeah, so it's interesting just how many parallels we do have. And obviously I spoke earlier about how I went to floristry college and like I almost like fell into floristry because I was meant to do something for work experience at the school that I went to, and that fell through last minute. And it was the school that was like, just go to this flower shop just so you've got something to do. So it was completely accidental, but it did just ignite this love with flowers. And it's very interesting because I love being out in gardens. I Another thing that we both love is the secret garden, and I I love really overgrown things. Like I'm a like just a complete goth at heart, so I love walking around old cemeteries where like it's almost like nature's claiming it back, and there's like tombstones that are covered in ivy. Like I love that kind of vibe. I love any kind of like opening within a hedge. Like I just have to walk into it because who knows where I'm going to end up. I love like the idea,
Totally.
yeah, like the
So
idea of
true. So
like
true. Yes.
if there's a door anywhere and there's some
Could be a
ivy, I'm
magic portal.
absolutely could. But I've never really loved growing flowers, and like the idea of gardening wasn't as appealing, even though like my mum's a gardener and my grandparents were really keen gardeners. So my granddad was a gardener at Kew Gardens in the 70s. And I've got some journals from Kew. They used to produce an annual journal that's like this really gorgeous, like sage colour. And there's pictures of him with all the other gardeners, and they had to wear like their suit and tie to get their pictures taken. And it's really nice walking around Kew being like, oh, some of these plants are probably plants that he cared for. And so he was obviously a very accomplished gardener. And there's some, after he'd finished his time at Kew, he then moved back up to Derby with my grandma. And there's some trees that still exist now that have been planted in Derby that he's responsible for. And so
Oh,
it's
wow.
just,
That's so
yeah,
beautiful.
it is like just part of someone's legacy, I guess. And so my grandma was also a very avid gardener. They used to own a garden centre together. They had it at a time where like kind of big garden centres came along that have cafes and things like that, and they like just couldn't compete. But even till very recently, the glass houses that my granddad had built still stood there on the land, and it was just yeah, it was almost like a bit haunting to kind of go past their old house because their garden centre just used to be like in their garden kind of thing. And yeah, my grandma just had this absolute love of flowers, but she also loved cut flowers. And so she would always have a vase of fresh flowers in her house. And I don't know, I just feel like I fell in love with flowers and not like the garden. And then that was really reinforced by going into floristry. I didn't really deal with plants that often. And so people will always ask me, like, oh, what should I do with such and such plant? And I'm like, I don't know. Like I've never really had access to a garden. Like I'm in a tenement in Glasgow, and so we have like a shared garden that is just a bog. It's just swampy. It doesn't get an ounce of sunlight. And so I've never had a chance to grow things. I have houseplants, but I always just kill them. And so yeah, it's very weird how I feel like there's this disconnect between cut flowers and plants. And I think that's something that I'm trying to unlearn because I've always relied on imported flowers that are always like very straight stemmed, very just they're different to what you find growing in the garden. And so I'm trying to embrace more of the kind of wild and natural forms of flowers. I think that's like a process that I'm going through, but I like it sounds so lame, but I just adore flowers. I just love being around flowers. I think one of the turning points for me was really similar to you, but just discovering that you can put flowers in your hair. So the flower shop I used to work at, I mean, I've worked in a few different ones, but when I was a teenager, the one I worked at, we had a wedding specialist who specialized in wired flowers. And so that's a very, very like dated style now. You wouldn't, and there's lots of shops that still do lots of wide flowers, but there's definitely a move away from it. And so she would wire like wedding bouquets, they're really structured, and every single individual flower would be wired and taped. And so the bouquets would just weigh a ton because it was just mainly like wire that was holding it together. And so for my prom, when I would have been, I guess about 16, I was just like, I really want to wear a flower crown. I used to like to cause a lot of shock. And so for my prom, I brought these huge, enormous New Rock boots, which were like these big, clumpy, like metal and leather contraptions that I then laced up with bright pink ribbons. I got a really short black velvet dress, and then I got the wedding specialist to make me a flower crown that was essentially pink and black. So she'd got some pink nerines, which are really interesting looking flowers that they look almost spiky and they come in very, very bright pink. And then she'd got some really dark foliages, and then she'd taken some gerbras and plucked off all the petals. But when you pulled them off, their centers were black. So then they were black flowers essentially. And then it was like bright pink roses. And she just made me this incredible flower crown. And there was just something about wearing it and it really feeling like myself. And I was just like, oh, this is just what I love. And then when I decided to go back to floristry like 5 years ago, one of the first things I did was go and buy some peonies just from the supermarket. And I just sat and wired them. I got some little spray roses and I went and picked some foliage from just like from my local park, which you're not meant to do, but whatever. And I just made a flower crown, and I think it was for a friend's wedding, and just putting it on, it just felt like stepping back into who I was when I was 16, and I was like stubborn and knew what I wanted. And at the time, when I was 16, I thought I wanted to be a journalist, but I had a lot of convictions that I really stood by. And putting this flower crown on when I was like late 20s just made me realize, like, oh, this is actually what I want. This is where I should be. I think it really, so much of it comes down to flower crowns. Like that really is what sparked joy for me. And I don't tend to make them for clients. I think it's only maybe been one or two people who've worn them for their weddings, but most of the time I just make them for myself and just for content for social. And so it's almost become like a nice little ritual where if I ever have leftovers or if I ever get given a bouquet or anything like that, if I ever have access to any flowers, I just put them into a crown. And that just
Love that.
really, yeah, there's just something about it. And so even when I stopped working in flower shops and I started working in the charity sector, I still said, oh, I'm a florist. I would always find an excuse to bring up the fact I was a florist. And there was times when I wouldn't have worked in a flower shop for maybe like 3 years, and I would still introduce myself as I'm a florist. And it was just a huge part of my identity that just never went away. And I think it is just one of those things where I think maybe it was just like a lack of self-trust. I had a friend who I'd met at floristry college who was like a few years older than me, and I remember being in her studio. Like she had been a florist for like maybe 15 years at this point, and she'd owned shopped and she'd had studios, and she was like she'd been in Vogue, and she had just done incredible things with flowers. And I remember being in her studio and being like, oh, but like people don't, you can't make money from being a florist. And she was just like, what? Like, look around. Like, you're in my studio that has been paid for by flowers. She was just like, why are you telling yourself that? And so, yeah, I think when I got over my self-doubt, I guess, that is when I was just like, I'm just gonna do it. And I'm doing it.
That's amazing. Wow. And I remember you saying, like, I think it was when you were doing the flowers for your grandmother's funeral, I think. And was this right? You started to just strip the flowers and it all just like came back like second nature And you're like,
Yeah,
oh, that's right. It's just in my body. My body remembers it. And it just was like, oh, yeah, this is what I know to do.
that is spot on. And it is such a tactile thing. Like you work with your hands and it honestly just feels like the saying where it's like you never forget how to ride a bike or whatever it is. That's how it felt with flowers. Like having flowers back in my hand just felt really natural. And there's still some things that I've not done for ages, but then I'll pick up the tool and I'll like start doing it and it will just all come flying back to me. And it is just, yeah, it's just, I guess, part of who I am now. And I don't think, I don't, I don't think I could ever do anything else. I think I'm always going to be doing something that's related to flowers. Do you have a flower in particular that really speaks to you?
I feel like that quote from Ever After where she says, I could no sooner choose a favorite star in all the heavens. I'm such a nerd. But I feel like that about flowers. Like, I don't know if I could ever choose a favorite. The ones that I really love and resound with are ones that hold a lot of memory and nostalgia and meaning to me. So, geraniums, I know they're probably not like the most glorious looking flower, but to me, the scent of a geranium smells like home. Um, I love lilac trees, like the fragrance of a lilac tree, and the color is just heavenly. I love gardenias, they look like they're made of sugar. I love delphiniums, like they just look like little butterflies hanging out. And I love the big plushy ones. So I love peonies and ranunculus. I also have really strong feelings about plants and flowers that I do not like. Like,
Me too. Me too.
really? Really? What would be some of yours?
No, no, no. You share yours, but I've had people be like, I can't believe there's flowers you don't like. And
Oh,
so I'm glad it's not just me. So you share the ones you don't like.
okay, but in this is gonna say in this is probably like and Flora's not allowed to say this, I don't know, you have to tell me, but I actually don't really like roses. I only like some roses, like the big plushy ones. I
Mm.
think the ones that are just really tight and I don't know, I just think they look really obnoxious. And then I hate like I don't like flowers that have like sort of spikiness to them, with the exception of a straw flower. I love a straw flower. But I don't, yeah, I don't like plants that have like spikes. I don't like flowers that have spikes. I like it to be quite soft. But yeah, I really don't like, I don't really like gerbils. They really annoy me. But I love daisies, which is kind of like, it just seems like a more humble gerbera. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, I don't know. I'm just quite fussy. Like when we go to buy plants and flowers, I'm like, no, no. But what are
Yeah.
some of yours?
So I'll be positive and I'll start with some of the ones that I love. I do get what you're saying about roses. I had a very long time where I was just like, I hate roses. And I think what I hated about them was um, for Valentine's Day, I'd have to condition like 2,000 of them, and my hands would be so bloody and just scarred for life. And that really annoyed me. But I think the thing that I thought that I hated about them was that people send them without thought. So at Valentine's, you would just be like, right, I'll send red roses. And red roses don't really do anything for me. But actually, now I no longer do anything for Valentine's. And and so roses are one of my favorites. There was a moment a couple years ago. There's been a couple times when I've been down to Kew Gardens. I remember the first time I visited, I was so excited because it just held this really special place in my heart, even though it was somewhere I'd never been before. And my grandma had Alzheimer's, and I remember ringing her, and like she couldn't remember what she'd done yesterday. She couldn't remember if she'd eaten that day. And then I was just like, oh, I'm by this pond in Kew Gardens. And like everything just came back to her. And she was just like, visit here, go here. She was like, I can just picture where you are. And she had been like, the roses, like go see the roses. And I remember going and seeing the roses. And a lot of cut flowers don't hold their scent. Like they have just been, I guess it's to do with how they're produced, whether it's like for speed or I don't really know like how it works. But a lot of roses, cut roses that are imported, don't have a scent, and if they do, it's very faint. And so I'd never experienced flowers that had such a strong perfume. And it was, I can remember it being a really hot day, and I'm not great in the heat. And it was just almost like dizzying how gorgeous they smell and just how massive garden roses can be. And it just really sparked something in me. It was just so special. And I've been back a few times just to look at the roses because they're so beautiful. And so there's definitely specific roses that I
Mm.
favour, and I do use them quite a lot in my work. And it's one of those things that I perhaps didn't realise until I like stopped and kind of went through my portfolio to see the things that I kind of use quite regularly. And I also absolutely adore a spray rose. I think there's just something they're so versatile. I really enjoy making smaller bits and pieces. So a lot of people don't enjoy making buttonholes, whereas they're one of my favorite things to make. And I just
Mm.
love a spray rose in a buttonhole. I love using spray roses in headdresses and things like that. So yeah, their roses are definitely really special. I also absolutely adore blue delphinium. And it was one of
Yeah.
these flowers that I didn't realize that I enjoyed. I was freelancing for one of my friends and she had some blue hydrangeas in. And I remember saying to her, like, oh wow, like I love these blue hydrangea. But I don't really like blue flowers. And she turned to look at me and she was like, what are you on about? And I was like, yeah, no, I don't really like blue flowers. And she was like, you use blue delphinium in every single job you do. And I was like, no. And then I kind of had a little thought and I was like, oh, maybe she's onto something. And she was, because then I looked at my business card that I've been using for 5 years. There's blue delphinium in it. I use blue delphinium in everything. Like
That's so funny.
and it
You
was just
just
one of those
tuned it
things.
out. Like,
Yeah.
wow.
And
Wow.
I think it's the shape and the color that just I think blue can add so much to any color palette. I think it works really, really well. But yeah, so apparently blue delphinium is my favorite flower and I didn't realize. And then carnations are really special. Like pink carnations are really special. And I think that's more for memories. And so that
Mm.
was my grandma's favorite flower.
Yeah.
You can get them in so many different colors, which is just you can always get one to match your palette, which is just perfect. Um, but pale pink carnations were my grandma's favorite flower, and then I had made a pinky promise with her that when she died, I would make her a heart-shaped tribute with pale pink carnations. And so if it wasn't for that, I probably wouldn't have come back to floristry. So then they just hold an even more important place in my heart. So I love a
Mm.
carnation. And then it on the flip side, and I'm probably gonna just contradict everything I've just said. I really hate chrysanthemums. They are my
Oh yeah.
least favorite flower, and that is purely
I'm with you on
because
that one.
yeah, and I don't know if I am being a snob, and it's because they're cheap. Although some of them aren't even cheap, but I think I'm just scarred. The shop I used to work in was an Interflora shop, and it just relied on bulking out with the cheapest flowers they could get, which meant chrysanthemums. And so I think I've just used them too much,
Mm.
and they were never really my favorite anyway. I just find them there's I don't know if they're just too straight and boring, and I don't think there's any flair there. And so, if you love chrysanthemums, fine. That I've got a florist friend in Glasgow who does the most incredible things with chrysanthemums, and I don't know how she does it. Maybe magic, but I'm not that person, and I just don't enjoy working with them. Um, and I'm sure there's definitely flowers that I favor because I know that they're going to create really nice shapes or they're going to create something that I want. So there's definitely flowers that I'll always have as a go-to.
Mhm.
And I know this isn't technically a flower, but my favorite thing in the world is ivy, but particularly during the season where it's in berry because the berries are like dark black and it's
Oh,
just oh my gosh, I love it. I just love it. It's
I don't think I've ever
yeah.
seen ivy with berries. That's amazing.
Oh, I'll send you a little picture.
Yeah, yeah.
It is like it is stunning. I think I'm maybe the opposite to you, how you don't like the spiky flowers, because I I love like a really blousy, like peony, or like, a really like gorgeous, almost looking like soft to touch. I love that kind of really floral, really beautiful. But I like pairing that with then weirder shapes. And so I mean, I did an episode on thistles, and I quite like how prickly they are. I like the juxtaposition, and I quite like pairing really pretty flowers with then interesting, like weird textures. Like I've got some dried vines that just look a bit like gothic and a bit creepy, and I love pairing that with then like pretty roses and things like that. So I do quite like the kind of contradictions and like pairing them together.
I do. I love the sound of that.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Keeley, and for joining me forever now. You are the co-host and you can't leave ever.
It's such a pleasure, and I have to say I was so thrilled when you asked me, and I'd binged listened to all of your episodes, and I just was like, it took me a little while to say yes because I wanted to make sure that you were sure because it was just such a beautiful podcast, and I didn't want to, yeah, wrestle it away from you or anything. So I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. It's just lovely to talk
Oh,
flowers with you.
I'm so happy. I'm so happy you're here. Going forward, what can you expect from us? We are going to carry on doing a deep dive episode where one of us will research it and tell the other all about that. And the other person's going to come in a little bit blind so they can ask some interesting questions as we go along. So we'll still be having them, but we're also going to do mini episodes in between. And you'll just have to wait and see how they end up. So if you don't already, you should subscribe so you can catch our next episode. We're still going to be using the same feed that I've used previously. If you want to, you can come over and find us on Substack. We've created a new Substack for Flowers and Folklore. Keeley has also created a Instagram for Flowers and Folklore. We'll share the details in the show notes. Keeley has also made us a new cover art that you will see wherever you're listening to the podcast, and it is utterly beautiful. So thank you very much for that.
Pleasure.
The next episode should be with you very soon. I'm not going to give a date. So you'll just have to wait and see when it will arrive. But we will start as we get used to working together and putting out these episodes. We'll try and sort out a consistent day and time so you know when things are going to arrive. But thank you so much for listening, and thank you for being here, Keeley.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you, everyone, for listening. And if you want to find us in our own work, you can find us on Substack. You can find Sarah at The Foibles of a Florist. And you can find me at Secret Gardens, both on Substack. Again, we'll put the links in the show notes. Or you can find Sarah on Instagram at
Rook Botanics.
Rook Botanics. I knew that. Or me underscore Keeley Reese, I think. I don't know. I don't really use Instagram much. I got hacked years
We'll
ago.
pop it in the show notes.
I've never quite made it myself. Forgive. So we'll put them in the show notes, and you can find us there. And we write about flowers and stories and lovely things. So we'd love to see you over there. I didn't mean to say that about the roses. I'm sorry. And you know what's funny is like my favorite fragrance is rose. Like my perfume is rose
Isn't that
perfume.
funny?
I love like big plushy roses, but I really hate, like, at least for me.
Yeah, no, I know exactly what you mean. That's like, I feel like that's the difference between like garden roses and just like imported roses that have been made
that
for
I love
cut.
garden
Yeah,
roses. Yeah,
yeah,
100%.
yeah.
And yeah.
I know exactly what you mean.